What is up, good people? Oak Life Familia. It is Chris and Greg. Greg and Chris back at it again with another Roots and Branches. And today we're talking about heresy, call out culture, plus.
Yeah, look, I get crazy when the mic round. No sense of getting hyped now, but I'm...
So, Chris, you and I were talking a little bit about, or rather, this past Sunday, you were talking about the idea and the importance of our connection to creation, and how you called out. See what I did there? You called out some heresy in regards to how individuals have put different emphasis on aspects of faith that could be harmful in relation to that. And then we were talking about other conversations around things that you've seen on your social media feeds and stuff like that. So bring us in, catch us up. What are we talking about today?
For sure. And before I do that, one of the themes of this whole Roots and Branches thing has been that Greg and I accidentally match a lot, at least in accessories. And we both have, we're both male cis guys with different levels of melanin, but we often have like the same exact hat, and it's like, it's just funny. Today we match without matching. We have the same, this is like a green, army green hat. You got that?
Wow.
And a black, it's like black, I don't know.
Wow. I intentionally instinctually, I wanted to wear a backwards cap because my hair is getting long. So usually if I wear a black cap backwards, it's not as noticeable, but I knew you was going to wear a backwards cap. So I intentionally put on my beanie, and still here we are.
Yeah. It has a different texture to the screens. So
I have a hood on. So, we're at least varying a little bit.
One last thing before we talk about heresy and call out culture and community and all that stuff. Dude, haircuts are expensive. I was like, there's a memorial coming up that somebody in our church asked me to preside over or whatever, officiate or just be present. And I was like, I should get a haircut. It's been a long time. So I started to look at reservations. It's like $50 for a haircut.
And that's before tip.
I know. We've been doing it at home alone, not alone, but at home with razors, and my hair is just getting out of hand. Anyways, okay. So if you're here and you want to say what's up, we'd love some engagement. Sorry for that long introduction into our personal lives. So yeah, on Sunday we talked about the overarching theme is hiddenness, and this Sunday we're talking about this thing that's hidden in plain sight everywhere, creation, and re-examine some of our maybe assumptions or presuppositions around conscious and unconscious around how we see creation. And in Christian tradition, there's a lot of like bad theology or theology that's led to harm. And it was fun. I tried to playfully use the language of heresy, like around when we put ourselves, humans, at the center of the creation story, and it orbits around us. I think that is the term you could use as heresy. And that word has definitely been used and weaponized, and in a way that excludes people, and even misused, or used. I just don't know if we know what that word means. And I hope it wasn't like hurtful to anybody to say like, hey, the earth isn't here for our consumption exclusively. Like that's
right.
Theologically incorrect, and you could use the word heresy. But like somebody reminded me that Jesus was a heretic in his time. So it's kind of arbitrary with who gets to be the heretic and who gets to make that call. And so this is kind of a fun conversation. And that kind of brought up like this idea. What I was doing in that sermon was kind of calling out an idea and saying, this idea, if we don't unpack it or unearth it or hold it in relationship to other ideas, can really be damaging. And I tend to want, like, my hope in a sermon, and I think like good sermons make us like aspire for good and love and to emulate Jesus. They like invite us into something rather than like judge us or condemn us. So I tend not to use like super harsh or absolute statements like that. Like, this is bad, this is good, as much as like, here's some ideas. Let's see where God might be pulling us wherever we're at towards a deeper expression of Christ's love. So some of those things came up, and I was reminded of like, yeah, I think there's a lot of that negative talk in culture. And I'll stop there. So does that kind of set up the
Perfect.
conversation?
100%.
Did I miss anything there?
No. That's good. That's good. And I think you brought up something worth noting or repeating even, that calling out, because call out culture is this term now, right? And I think when we call out, Torn Wells, fully known, says you call us out to pull us in, right? So it's a call out for an invitation versus a call out to cancel, exclude, and separate. The motive for the calling out is what determines whether the call out in and of itself can be healthy or unhealthy. So I think if you're going to call something heresy to invite people into dialogue and conversation and relational like exploration, that's nothing wrong with that, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
So that's good.
And some of it's tone, and like, I mean, there's gonna be lots of times where if you speak in public, you're gonna always look back and like, I could have maybe said it slightly better. That said, I think there are things that should be called out. Like, and the where that line is sometimes the question. Sometimes like it's often very obvious, like white supremacy, the anti-Asian racism and the attacks of violence we've been seeing. In my opinion, on Sunday, anthropocentrism, like using the earth as our own thing, just to exploit and consume and possess. Yeah. That's going to hurt us long term, and that has ramifications for marginalized people, especially like who won't be able to deal with climate change. In the same way that those of us with privilege can turn on the AC or move or whatever. So I think there's some real ramifications there. So like, yeah, so when and how, but in general, I like the idea of call in versus call out.
That's good.
And here's a question, because with that framework, with grace, through the lens of grace, is there anybody that gets canceled in the end by God? Like, so, and by that I mean like the ultimate judgment of like this person. Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit before, but any reactions to that?
Just a clarifying question: are you saying like who doesn't get into heaven, or who doesn't get loved by God while here on earth? Like, what is this question that you're unpackaging?
So the call out, like so the memes and stuff that are happening, like so much of my social media feed is like, if your church didn't do X, Y, or Z, my social media feed within like the Christian conversation, if your church didn't do X, Y, or Z, if your pastor said this, or if you voted this way, like you're bad, is basically the underlying sentiment. In a sense, like you got to quit that church, you leave that person, and sometimes you got to do that. But it is a call out with this, like, we're on the right side, they're on the wrong side. And I think one of the underlying, like the sentiment underneath that practically happens is they're canceled. Like they're the bad guys, we're the good guys.
Yep.
So that flesh it out? Okay.
Kind of. So one of the conversations is this idea of moral privilege. We have been privileged to not deal with certain things. Therefore, we are now separate from them. And if we don't have a relationship with them, then we have the privilege of believing that we have the moral high ground when that may or may not be true. I'll say this for sure. I had people tell me, hey, if your church, Oak Life, since your church is doing this, you are wrong. I've had people tell me I'm not going to continue going there. I've had people tell me that you should leave. I had people tell people that I associated with, well, if you're associating with him and he's associating with that church, then you are not living right. So people are always going to say that. But until they have that lived relationship, they don't have the strong argument. It's kind of a straw man argument. They don't really know what they're calling out. They're calling out something that's very, very surface, and they're not actually. It's a call out based on ignorance, for lack of a better term, and not in a like ignorant, like just what the word means: lack of information, lack of knowledge, lack of understanding. Without that relational, experiential insight, who's to say whether they're right or wrong? They don't know.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but
It does
that's
not,
what
but it's a
that's
good.
what I think when I hear your
Uh,
question.
Yep. Well, and I mean, bringing it to the relational component is significant when you bring up the how we envision and think about God, because that was kind of my question was kind of that, which was a blindsided like, does God cancel people, Greg? But
Short
bring
answer
it,
is no.
yeah, but in relationship changes people,
Yeah.
and it's always relational and somewhat contextual. Um, yeah, and that's one of the dangers. Like, there's so much good with social media and communication and ideas being spread the way they are, but one of the dangers, what's up, Aaron, is that the call out meme. Um, I made this like joke. I don't know if it's a good joke or not, but the Enneagram, call out memes that like inform us of like stuff where it's like a box with like writing, and it's like it's usually probably true or at least worth thinking about. Um, but they get traction. Those are the new Enneagram. Like the way the Enneagram was everywhere, those call out memes are that's the new thing. um, yeah, and sometimes they're good. The question is the balance. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a time that I need to think through this this issue, like, and maybe sense some conviction.
Yeah.
But if that's all that our relationship, like the bulk of what I see in terms of spiritual discussion and conversation on social media is that, like,
Yeah.
and that's what gets traction. So why does that, like, why is that? What, answer that?
So I just want to call out something. The conversation is tracking towards like memes, social media influence platforms, stuff like that. But you dropped a little side tangent. You said, "Does God cancel people?" And that made me think of two individuals in the Bible. You have Judas, and you in New Testament you have Pharaoh in Old Testament. These individuals, it almost seemed as if their whole design, destiny, and role in life was to be the thorn in the side of good and to be plucked and flicked away. So with so it's like, all right, did God like set them up for that? Were we set up for failure? Not we, but were those individuals set up for failure? Which means, is there potential for God to be like, nah, your whole purpose is to be x'd out? Like, so now you've kind of opened up two different pathways of this conversation to go. So I don't know. Where do we want to go today, Chris?
Well, that is a question I think that different theological camps will answer. Like, there are some in the Reformed tradition that would say, yes, some people are created to go to hell, like to
Yeah.
be condemned forever, or for this thing, and that doesn't. I can't see that in both in the story of Scripture, like what the heart of it all is, and in my own personal experience with God. Like, that's not the God I've
Right.
come to know.
Right.
So there's that piece. So yeah, there are some Christians who think that. I don't think it's healthy theology.
I agree.
I don't know if I'd say they're wrong because it's somewhat speculative, but I have a hunch they're wrong.
That's a humble response. There you go.
And then does God cancel people? My disposition is no. There's always relational grace, and not everybody needs to receive it, or not everybody wants it. But there are areas of all of our lives where we need to work on and grow, and maybe sense conviction and change around.
Yeah.
I would like to point out that Aaron doesn't think I'm that funny, but laughed at their own joke.
Yo, literally. Oh man, I was looking up memes in preparation for this conversation, and there was a meme of Michael Jordan looking at a tablet, and then it was like a serious look, and then a laughing, and then it said, "This is me when I read my own tweets." That was Aaron laughing at her own joke.
Yep.
But yeah, so Aaron agrees. Super unhealthy theology, that whole predetermined thing, because it sets up this. It sets up the premise of exclusion, in that some are in and some are out, and our job is to determine who's in and who's out. There are different points in Scripture that I could point to right now, but it's not our job to determine who's in and who's out. And we assume that, and there's a bunch of different arguments we can go down that path. But if sin, and we've had a couple conversations on what sin is, and I think that's an ongoing conversation always. But to give a really, really, really simplified answer, if it's a relational wedge between loving God, loving others as we love ourselves, then anytime relationally we put barriers between us and others, chances are that can be constituted as what sin is. So like, if God's not calling us to sin, the antithesis would be love, right? To build those connections of relationships. Then anytime we exclude others, it's probably not healthy. Probably not healthy in a general sense. Now, if someone's causing physical harm, emotional harm, mental harm to you, yes, love would be creating that space so you can heal. But anyway, I kind of want to bring us back to that conversation that you were talking about, because the premise of the memes, the call out culture, specifically on social media, there's this idea of influence and there's this idea of space, since we're talking about space between others, right? So if you have a certain influence, and you and I were conversing about this earlier, if you have a certain influence and you just start saying things and people are going to hear them, but you have no relational connection to them, then like, what does that do? What does that mean? How does that impact the broader body? You got some thoughts there?
Yeah. And there's a place for that. All these things, I think it's like, we go back, we talk about balance and tension here. Like, I think Oak Life and a lot of churches like ours, like, this is maybe healthy human living too. Like, this idea is good, and but there's got to be some balance. And that's part of the reason we need the body too, like in terms of like a community, a family. So I don't think it's bad to have like thoughts put out there at all. Like, even the way we do it, even though they are abbreviated like sound bites, and they're like, I think the system underneath it, which prioritizes controversy and what I would say is like negativity, that's dangerous. Like, because the only stuff that really, if I like make a tweet or whatever about like, yeah, I really love God, and like today I went on a jog and like I just felt God's presence in the sun, like, nobody's gonna be upset by that. Nobody's gonna like want to engage in the comments. Nobody's gonna feel like, oh, I've been waiting for this person to share this thing so I can get at that one person. Like, and so it doesn't go viral in the same way. So I don't think there's a anything inherently bad about like somebody with a more prophetic voice that like challenges injustice, calls it out, calls it in, whichever language you want to use. But I just think there's no balance on social media with this stuff right now. At least that's, I mean, Aaron and I were talking about this actually like yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday. And so I think it's that balance. And then to your point, having like, I read authors I've never met who have like really changed my life, or listen to music that's changed my life, and I don't have a relationship with them. So it's not bad. It's just, if that's the only way we're doing spiritual community is through a social media influencer, like this person's our leader, or we're following what they're saying, there's some danger there, or some risk, maybe is a better way to say it. And I ultimately think that community, which is way harder work than becoming an influencer or being controversial, because you have to have face-to-face relationships where you actually like have to endure patiently in love people's brokenness, and people's beauty. That it's just a different thing. So yeah. So did I answer the question? What are your thoughts like to what you asked?
As I'm listening, I'm just reflecting. I don't know if we're asking clear questions or providing clear answers, but roots and branches, we're just going deep. Sometimes we go out there, and I think we're going out there today. But you set up this I guess varying like source of where we pull our spiritual health or our influence or our insight or whatever the case is. Sometimes it's like from an author and a music where there's this huge relational gap. Sometimes it's community, and you talk about balance. I just think of food groups. I feel like so often people can say, oh, carrots are good, therefore all I'm going to eat is carrots. And if you eat anything that's not a carrot, you're probably not as good as me. So I'm just going to keep eating these carrots. And it's like, yeah, carrots are great. That doesn't mean that that's where you pull all of your source of goodness from. You can't just eat carrots and be healthy. I mean, rabbits, I guess, would argue with that. I don't freaking know. But
I know somebody who ate a lot of carrots.
What'd you say?
I knew somebody who ate so many carrots, his bones turned orange. I think you know this person too. But
Of course, that Chris is not making this up. That is fact. I also saw the pictures. But to the point being is that if you only pull your source of like spiritual insight, influence, and just relational insight and influence from one group, like if you just have a tight knit community and that's it, then you're not going to be aware or conscious of what life exists like outside of that. And then it's easy to have this right and wrong like framework. And then vice versa. If you're only pulling information from people that you don't know, then when stuff gets like hard and you can't access them, then it's going to be really hard to find like that emotional balance. So having like different pockets of relational influence, I think, is what you're arguing in this case.
would you say that, yes, more or less, and that's the balance point. Like, would you say that some of those different pockets are more important? Like if you do the food pyramid, I know we've debunked that in a lot of ways, but like the idea underneath it is like there's some like core essential things you need, and then there are some tertiary, like secondary things up top.
Mm-hmm.
Would you see that some of those places of spiritual insight, encouragement are more important than others for our overall health?
I mean, I would say yes, there is higher importance. I think if there was an order of operations, I would say the pastoral thing to say is that relationship with God at the base of that pyramid. Relationship, in my opinion, would be self second, and then others. Reason why is because we tend to love others how we love ourselves. And if we have unhealthy practices of self-love, chances are we can extend those unhealthy practices to others. I think loving self so that you can love others creates this healthier balance. There's this African proverb that I am because we are. So you start with the I, but you know that I exist because of we, then that order works. Mm-hmm. If you're like, wait, I got to take care of all of my needs first because I operate in this place of scarcity and then I'll love others later, I don't think that's the healthiest approach. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if we establish our relationship with God by our relationship with self and others, and then we work inward community out. So like, yeah, I have people that know me, like I can just give them a look and they know exactly what I'm thinking. And then we work our way to those people that like are on our social media platform that they like everything that we post, and we've never met them, never heard their voice, but like we know we're down for each other. Like that's cool too, nothing wrong with that. Yep. But I would say it would work bottom up.
Yeah. Well said, Pastor Greg. Where does a call out meme or an informative, where would that fit in?
So you saying, where do I call out somebody for being wrong?
Or something, or yeah. And both in us doing it, but us also consuming that energy.
Okay. I'm going to respond, and then just know I'm ping-ponging it right back at you, okay? So get ready to answer. You're on deck. My thought is that if I call something out that I have no relational experience or understanding to, chances are I'm wrong, because chances are I don't really understand what I'm talking about. That's the short answer. Now, that said, if I say anti-Asian violence is wrong, no one's going to argue that. The argument comes in as to what is the motivation for me saying that. If I say that because I truly believe it, then there's some health in that. If I say that because I see it trending and I want to be noticed and I want to be seen and I want other people to believe that I'm woke and I'm with today, that's not healthy. No one will know that unless they know me though, right? So it's just this weird, like, it's just hard to say if you don't really know the person or the source of where the information is coming from. That's my response. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking, so ping pong back at you, man.
Well, before you answered like half of it, which was in communicating those things.
Got it.
What about in consuming?
Okay. So again, it goes back the same answer. What is the motivation? If I'm consuming it because I think it's hilarious to like see memes and see people, and I'm just kind of laughing at, yo, we wilding out. We are a crazy group of Christians or humans or Americans or whatever the case is. And it's like entertainment. I don't see the harm in that personally. Like you can have some fries every now and then, right? But if if that's where I'm getting my like gospel doctrine is based off of these call out memes, like if I'm getting into arguments and I'm like, but you see this meme, then I don't know if that's the healthiest.
Mhm. Good. Yeah, that's I like those thoughts. I don't think I have a lot of incongruity with that. And I think it goes back to the balance thing. I loved you brought up relational connection to it. Like there's a different level of authority and care and concern and passion like around certain like I'm following a lot of stories about what's going on in Myanmar. Like it's a very disproportionate amount of my news feed and what I'm like looking at. And that's because there's a lot of stuff going on in Myanmar and I'm connected to it and all that stuff. But so I think there can be when there's like a calling or a passion or a investment in a topic, there's that. Yeah, I think my overall thing is social media is so negative. Like just in general, like these are vast generalizations. If I was to like group like positivity or negativity as just general energies that you have, and in this theory in this example, I get to be the one who decides what's positive and negative. So for me, maybe for each of us, we get to do that. If I was to like percentage them, like, and with also the caveat that the negativity tends to draw us in more and stick with us longer. Like in the same way, you could have 10 nice things said about you, but the one person who says like, you look this way or whatever, like that's what's going to stick with you. Knowing that's our energy, our connection to the positive and negative energies. I just think there's stuff we have to walk with wisdom and discernment and care and tenderness through. Yeah. And I love that you brought up community. Like I think community is important. And I just wonder what it means to speak life. And Aaron and I were talking about this actually, like that idea, like how do you, in that space, if this is one of the mediums that we have to communicate ideas, words, emotions, data with one another, how do we speak life?
Yo, that is a really good question. For those of you who are with us live, Aaron, if you're still with us live, light up this chat. Let us know, how do we speak life in 2021 in our current situation where we're still shelter in place, we're still keeping a distance, things are opening up slowly, but right now, as Chris mentioned, a lot of the energies that we see on social media are leaning towards negative. How do we speak life in this time? So answer that. And while we're answering that, Chris, so I'm going to ask you, how do we speak life in 2021? But before I ask that, I'm curious to see, what do you think is the source of why we gravitate towards that one negative comment, or why we're just inclined to negative things as you see it on social media? What do you think the source of that is?
A lot. Everything from biological, like anthropological, like we unify as communities based on having common enemies or common things that we're against. Like it's the easiest way you want to build a people is you tell them you find a common enemy. So it's like that kind of stuff. I think just the nature of social media and how it's designed to manipulate our brains, like I think draws us into that stuff. And like I said earlier, like controversy, and yeah, like harsh, strong, like black and white statements, like draw us in. Sometimes I think there's ego involved. Sometimes it's actually right and it needs to go viral. Like this thing actually needs to be said, and we all gotta hear it and say it. But there's kind of a one-upsmanship with social media. It's like, who's the next or the most? I know, like, I actually think the language around being woke is beautiful. Like, I know it gets from some talking heads or whatever, it gets poo-pooed on. But I think, I want to be a human who's awake and sees reality for what it is. So I don't know, sometimes we're trying to be the most woke. So when it's prideful or inauthentic, that's different. But Yeah, those are kind of my initial reactions to the question, why? But also, like, we're longing for security. We're longing for somebody who seems to have the answers and can tell us, like, how things are. So, I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Nope. We're not done. So, with all that being said, how does one speak life?
Oh.
If anthropologically we're kind of living in a society where the forms of communication that we have are structured to pick at our human design towards negative and finding safety and trying to find bonds and stuff like that. How do we fight against that? How do we work against that? How do we speak life when so much of our life is dictated by these negative and painful and hurtful realities?
Lots of ways. I mean, we all kind of have a sense of what's like speaking positive energy versus not, or what's neutral. But this is my confession. I'm way more likely to like say something negative about something than I am offer encouragement to people I love. Like, oh, this thing sucked today. Like, oh, like that person annoyed me. Like, this was frustrating. And like, versus like, when was the last time I encouraged somebody like, you're really good at that. I love the way you do this. And like, and so just taking that and contextualizing it, whether it's online or on Instagram or in person or wherever, like walking around, seeing the good and speaking it and acknowledging it and encouraging it. Yeah, what a gift it is when that has happened to me. Like, people believed in me, they saw something in me, and how it's really, really joyful, like, to get to do that for other people too. Like, and I'm not saying there isn't a space for language that convicts us towards love, but I think if there's a balance, if there's like, if I want to err on one of those sides of the spectrum, I'd rather err on the side of like encouragement towards love rather than conviction towards love. If I'm going to make a mistake, like, and ultimately we all just talk too much. So maybe we just need to not be as noisy and just be people who listen a lot, including on social media or in person or whatever. Okay, your turn.
No, Chris, I'm gonna practice my listening right now, and I'm gonna, soak it all in, man. Be observatory, man. That's what I'm gonna do. But no, that's good stuff, man. I think a lot of the reoccurring themes in this conversation have been this sense of balance, this sense of awareness, this sense of kind of relational establishment in a variety of ways, right? I think that's good. Things have to exist close to the heart, and things also have to exist, a little further out from the heart, right? And that is optimal health. So having that balance is really good. And I think that you're right. If the inclination is negative, which I think if I had to give an answer to that, it's because it's hard to deal with what's in here and what's in here. There's a lot of unknowns. So it's easier to identify what's out there, and that takes the focus away from here and say, oh, that's bad. Because if I say that thing's good, then I'll say, how come I don't have that thing? Do I have that thing? And then I'm back to feeling bad about myself. So it's easier to just say, oh, that thing's negative. And then I'm like, ooh, well, at least I'm not that thing, right? So I think that's part of what drives us towards looking for the negative and sitting with the negative externally. But if we find the things that make us happy, if we find the things that make us joyful, if we are intentional, like the last sermon series we had was all this intentionality towards self-care and this intentionality towards understanding. We spend a lot of time in reflecting on communion and the intentionality of remembering God and remembering the good. I think that's very, very pivotal to our shift from negative to health. But yeah, that's my 2 cents, man. That's all I got.
It's good. So who are we calling out today? I'm just kidding.
I'm calling out Cliff. Cliff, get your health right, people. We're talking about nourishment. You got to stay nourished, and Cliff is the best way to get your bars, to get your proteins, to get your healthy carbs, and get that sustained energy to go out and conquer the day, feeling good on the inside and the out. This message is brought to you in part by Cliff, a non-sponsor. I just like Cliff bars. So
I think a in-kind donation might be considered sponsorship. So yeah, it could be goods or services, not just monetarily.
Interesting. Well, if
we
that's the
did get
case, then
some
yeah, the
clip bars
past.
donated.
I would say all of our communion moments and this message was brought to you in part by Cliff Bar for sustained energy. Yeah,
Well,
that's good, man.
Now I'm hungry.
Are you going to call out anything? I like the call out versus the call in. I think we should call in more. Calling in is good. I often reflect on, we're getting long, but I often reflect on in Ephesians, Paul called out Peter. And to me, that's not that Paul is the end all example, but I think it's a good example of like, when do we call out things that we deem right and wrong or healthy and unhealthy, which is probably better terminology. And it all goes back to that relationship. I can't stress it enough. I feel like that is the reoccurring frequency that we vibe on, Chris, is this idea of relationship. And because he knew Peter, he could see what Peter's true motives were. And that's why he was able to call him out and rather call him in to this more healthy way of going through things. So if we're calling people in to relationship, I think we're doing something good. If we're calling things out, maybe we should check our motives. But I feel like I'm getting preachy. I don't like it. I'm done.
Yeah, I mostly agree. It's just those clear-cut examples. And those, when we decide who decides those, generally they're pretty easy. It's like, that's why, like the 10 Commandments, like these are the obvious ones, roughly speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a lot of fun rambling, as we always do. So hopefully, if you're watching, thanks for watching and hanging with us, and thanks for being a part of this community in this time. And know that we're all just trying to walk the path of love, processing and wrestling.
Yeah. Oh man, we lost one. Hey, I want to know really quick. You said you mostly agree. Where do you disagree, Chris?
Oh, just that you said if you're calling things out, it could be unhealthy. And that's where I'm like, well, with the exception of like white supremacy or like there are things that we should call out. And I think the parsing of like systems, powers and principality systems versus people is a piece. Mm-hmm. Values that move us towards isolation or hate or language that does that. Versus people, calling out people. I think people should be called in.
Speaking of people,
welcome.
What's up, South Africa? Okay, let's go. That's what's up. And then my main man, Anth, in the building. He likes to call in versus call out. Yeah. No, I like that you brought that up, Chris, because that creates space for clarity. I wasn't saying necessarily that calling out is unhealthy. I'm saying that it can be, and I think we should check our motives, right? Because again, if we're just trying to jump on a bandwagon that we actually don't know anything about, there's probably some unhealth that we have to, think through, work through, talk through. But no, you're absolutely right. The principalities versus the people, I think that's a good, healthy way to kind of like decipher where you're at on that spectrum. But would like to join. All right, you know what? We gotta follow up. Can we follow up? Can we follow up with them?
Yep. We will.
Are we gonna follow up with you? Oh man, I want to say your name, fam, but I don't want to butcher it either. But we're gonna follow up with you, homie. Appreciate you, and I guess that's it for the conversation. If you're watching this at a later time, feel free to comment because the conversation doesn't stop here. It keeps going. So let us know what you want to talk about. Let us know what you think about these conversations because it's in this relational dialogue that we get to grow and we get to learn. And that being said, anything else to say, Chris?
We're good.
All right, we're out this thing. Continue to live, love, fight, and follow, fam, and we will catch you on the next one.
Peace.
Talk to him. I ain't got a hoop.